Cool.
1. Chris, what's up, man? I know it's more like good, I guess, early afternoon to you. You're in California, man. How's your day going?
It's going good, man. It's going good. Yeah. And it is the morning. It's 11 a.m. Beautiful day. Got a big swell that is shortly about to hit the coast. So might be some surfing tonight. But yeah, man, it's been good. I'm stoked to be home.
What does a morning look like for you at home with the kids, with the family?
That's a great question. To be honest, normally I would say that when I'm home and I'm not traveling, I try to spend most of my day, you know, filling up my cup, I guess you could say, going to yoga and then going to like ride my bike or something like that. And oftentimes, I'm trying to spend as much time with my kids as I can. So usually I'll be like going on a hike with them, making sure I'm having dinner with them, just all those things. But a typical day would be I woke up at 6 a.m. and went to yoga and hot yoga class, which is
Nice.
nice. Keep the body limber. And then came home, and then now I'm at the office and got to the office at 9, and usually like try to put all of like the important things I have to do kind of before noon. Um, and then in the afternoon, I'll try to go out for a bike ride or go for a surf or something like that. So I try to operate by like giving myself two opportunities to have some movement during the day. I think that's really important
Hmm.
for me and for everybody really. But
Yeah.
I like the idea of like having an early workout, get that out of the way, it's done, and then try to do something, another workout or just experience, nature, be outside, surf, be on a trail is really nice. Winter time is like my favorite because the weather here is so good. So
Hmm.
you can kind of do everything. But yeah, that's a typical day. And then home with the kids, and then trying to plan and orchestrate what I have going on next and
Yeah.
what's coming down the pipeline. So
Well, the thing is, I was, thinking about your career and actually on the movement part. I'm actually going to hot yoga class later today, and I fully believe in like being in nature, all that sort of stuff for your mind and your body. But I was thinking about you and your career, and I was thinking, what was he probably doing as a kid? Like, what filled your cup up as a kid? What got you going as a kid growing up in California?
mm. you know, definitely I operated, differently as a kid. I don't think I was. It was funny because I don't think that I was that kid who like gravitated towards being outside as much as possible. And I definitely wasn't as obsessed with like um obsessed with kind of like nature and those things as much as I am now. Like nowadays it's
Hmm.
such a bigger part of my life. And I think a big part of that is like I grew up in a single parent home, and I didn't, my mom had to put me in like daycare and stuff like that while she worked to make a living for both of us. So I don't think that I grew up with that really. And then when we did have time, like we would always try to go on a hike together, go to the beach or whatever it was. So my mom really, I think she gave me a deep appreciation for nature, even though it didn't like come out when I was a kid. And usually I'd like just bury my nose in a book or, kind of be, want to be home watching a movie or doing whatever. I wasn't as I guess you could say like psychoactive as I am now. But it's funny how those things kind of like they set a precedent in your life, and then they sometimes manifest later. I actually
Hmm.
noticed that a lot with a lot of traits. You don't fully appreciate them when they're given to you, and then later on, it becomes like the most important thing to you. And I never would have imagined, where I am now. Living
Sure.
part time in Iceland, living part time in California, and really truly appreciating both those places for their access to the outdoors. Like that's
Hmm.
so unique to me. So yeah, I don't know. It's hard to really say where that inspiration came from at an early age. But I think it was the byproduct of like a lot of people, who kind of came in, stepped in, like since I didn't have a father figure who kind of came in and were there for me, kind of giving me all types of experiences, because that's the thing I feel so important to advocate for is kids in situations like mine getting access to the outdoors and getting just introduced to things. Maybe they don't stick, maybe they don't love it, but just letting them try those things is so important.
Yeah, I know for me as a kid, being outdoors and also being like part of teams and sports teams and stuff were a big part, for my development. Do you have any memory of like maybe something you wanted to do as a kid? Like was a, for me, it was like a pro soccer player or something. Like, did you have any of that thought?
No, there wasn't like some career path that I was just like absolutely I was absolutely like drawn into, like I mean, as an early kid, I was like, oh, I want to be a firefighter. I want to do this and that. But, as I started to get older in high school, I was surfing a lot. And then I was working on cars and was kind of fully embracing the idea of just being an automotive technician and mostly like being obsessed with working on and customizing hot rods. And that's kind of what I did for a number of years. And I woke up one day and I was like, you know what? I don't think that being covered in grease is like my calling. And I just felt like it wasn't as creative as of an outlet as I liked. And at the end of high school, I picked up a camera, and that's kind of when I fell in love with the idea of creativity. I guess you could say it wasn't
Hmm.
like I didn't pick up a camera and I'm like, photography is it. This is my career. I never even thought about that. It was more a matter of like, this is an outlet that I really enjoy, creativity. And if I can just find a way to like do this in some format, I'll be happy. And so I was drawing, I was doing a lot of like pen and ink art. I was taking photos. I was kind of figuring out myself. And I guess the coolest thing is like I never had pressure to be something or be someone, or my
Hmm.
parents were never like, you need to play sports, you need to do this. You just they knew that I was like somebody who enjoyed trying new things and trying my best. And so they let me try it. And I was really grateful for that.
Yeah, I read this morning you got like your first camera from Goodwill. What got
Mhm.
you to get that first camera? Like what was your thought? What was to get you to go do it?
So I was dating a girl in high school, and I had borrowed her mom's camera, this old like old Nikon or old Canon, I can't remember, and I loved it. I was just messing around with it, sitting in my car. I'd bust it out. I'd go on trips with my friends to go surfing, and I'd take some photos here and there. And when I was developing the film, I was like, this is so cool, and I knew I needed a camera of my own, and so I gave hers back, and I eventually found an old Olympus at Goodwill, and I was like, "Oh, this is awesome!" Paid
Nice.
for it, everything. The camera never worked, and it was such a bummer because I had such high hopes, and it just never worked. And film never even ran through it. So I quickly ended up buying like a slightly newer like Nikon N90S at the time. It wasn't new by any means, but it was a film camera, more automatic, less manual, and I that was the first real camera that was like, this is mine. I loved it. Got a couple of really crappy lenses and just like went to town, just shooting as much as I could, shooting every single day, just doing everything. And it was rad. It was a really amazing experience. And to be honest, like something that I wish I appreciated more in the time,
Hmm.
in the moment. Because I think nowadays, in the age of instant gratification, in some ways the artistry is kind of lost, and the patience is lost for creating something, and something that like takes time, and even like letting your own personal style develop. We expect it to just be there, just like manifest it, it's
Yeah.
there. You shoot a photo on your phone and you expect it to just like unveil itself. And I guess in many ways I learned to appreciate like the slow burn of like,
Hmm.
going out and shooting photos. And then, if I was really in a rush, I'd do, 24-hour, film, processing, or pick it up in a couple days, and I'd be shooting like expired film, old film, slide film, print film, everything you could imagine. And just trying to cut my teeth on that.
Yeah.
So I guess I feel like that taught me a lot. And I really miss shooting film. I still have a number of film cameras. They're amazing, but yeah, it's pretty rad, man. I really
Was
miss it.
there was there a like an actual decision to make it your career, or did it naturally happen?
Huh. I mean, I guess you could say like there was a moment, yeah, where I kind of settled on photography like
Hmm.
as an art form, and I was like, this brings me a lot of joy. It wasn't so much like this is my career, it was more like, let's see where this goes. Like, what would happen if I gave everything to this craft?
What age was that?
19. And I remember vividly, I was working at Esquire News, this shitty magazine store in downtown Pismo. Like 2 feet to my left are all like the nudie magazines, and people would come in and like buy random newspapers or mags or whatever it was, and I'm just sitting behind the desk staring out the window at the surf. And I remember thinking to myself, like, I'm never going to see where photography could take me if I'm working here, if I'm pursuing, a sort of meaningless college education, just like filling time, filling credits.
Hmm.
Uh, it wasn't it wasn't purposeful. I wasn't being purposeful. I was just kind of like doing what I thought would make my mom happy, or doing what I thought society wanted me to do. And I told myself, like, listen, you're young, like give yourself 5 years, see where this takes you. If you're flat on your face somewhere, laying in the mud, like you didn't make it, then that's fine. You can always pick yourself back up and go back to school. It's no big deal. But if you're thriving, then you tried. And so I gave everything to it. I stopped. I just was like 100% pursuing photography. I literally was like going to random surf shops and skate shops, and people, kind of like groups that I was associated with, and would go in there and be like, do you need photos of your team? Do you need photos of your store? Like, how could I work for either money or store credit so I could then get some product and then sell it on, eBay or something like that. I'd run out on the pier, the local pier, and I just take pictures of random people surfing, and I'd run up to them afterwards and try to like sell them a photo of themselves for $20, right? Just anything to kind of make ends meet. And at that time it was pretty minimal. It was I didn't have a lot of expenses. So yeah, I mean, it's a longer story, but in the grand scheme of things, definitely I wish I would have appreciated it more, because it was a struggle
Hmm.
for sure. But it was also like there's some kind of, I look back on it with a lot of pride and a lot of joy, knowing that like I dedicated something more than just like, I don't know, like a couple hours on, scrolling my phone,
Yeah.
to kind of figure out who I was and what made me happy in terms of photography. And yeah, I'm grateful to be where I am now.
I do think that's
Really grateful. Yeah.
yeah, man. I mean, I think that's a pretty common theme too for entrepreneurs to almost like once they get to a level, like sit there and reflect and be like, you know what, I kind of wish I enjoyed that a little bit more. But at the time, it's kind of like you're living your own wild, wild west. You're just like moving and shaking and doing kind of what you love. Do you
Yeah.
remember maybe it could have been like your first big paycheck or your first big job that you got put on where you felt like, hey, this is like I'm semi made it, or like this is gonna work out for me?
No, everybody asks this story, and to be honest, there's never been a moment like that. I've never in my life reflected on like, wow, things have been gone really well. And it's just not how I operate. I don't operate in a way that's like looking back. I kind of operate more trying. I spent most of my life looking forward, looking ahead,
Mm-hmm.
um, maybe stressing about the future or worrying about the future, and trying to be proactive about procuring a safe future, right? And I think only in the last couple of years have I been able, or been given myself the permission to look at where I am now and be like, wow, I'm really happy. And not in a sense of like, let me sit on my laurels and just be
Yeah.
satisfied, but more so like, what is it that's making me happy? I want to do more of that, instead of just trying to accept and take every job and take every opportunity that comes my way. Because when you operate in a place of like feast or famine, or fight or flight, you tend to not put forth your best work, and it's really
Yeah.
hard. I've been in that space. So no, there isn't a single opportunity that came up. There were many, many small ones that were great along the way. Like the first time I like sold a photo to like an actual commercial client, which was like some super, super small company, that paid like 200 bucks or something like that. And I remember just stressing over how much to ask for and all those things. And obviously like the first time my work got published, and then I was big into like setting goals. I've always been pretty big into setting goals. Because I feel like it holds you to a standard in
Mm-hmm.
some way. Like I wanted to, be on staff for Surfer Magazine and be one of the very few retainer photographers. And it was a crazy joy to like do that for a number of years. And then also to, have gotten a cover of the magazine. That was a goal of mine too. I mean, these were all early goals. And I think that to know how much time and energy I put into trying to make that happen
Mm-hmm.
it felt very fruitful. But even in the moment, I remember like holding the magazine and being like, wow. And then just like,
What's
I
next?
just put it aside. Like, what's next? Maybe there's something wrong with me, but I'm not much of like a revel in the moment kind of person. I think it's funny how that's manifested, because even some of my best images that I've ever shot, or at least the ones that have like won an award or have garnered the most like commercial interest and made the most money, I never sat with those photos on the beach staring at them on the back of my camera. In fact, when I shot them, I was like, okay, whatever, just like keep going, keep trying, keep shooting, like how could I have done that better? And I think that's just the way that I've operated.
You've talked, and I find this pretty interesting. You talk early on in your career, you were on these, populated beaches and taking photos of, you know, I guess where people had been before. And then you
Yeah.
make the conscious decision to kind of almost like explore untouched waters. Like, what was that movement for you?
I'd be, I'd be ill-equipped to like share like the real journey to get there. Because I know that I spent so much time explaining that in my TED talk that's online. And I would say that's the very best way to really hear that. But essentially, there was a conscious decision made that I was traveling to places that were making my editors happy and were kind of satisfying the needs of those people that I was working for at the time, going to, warm locations that were, sure fire places to get good images of surfers, when that's what I was doing as a career path. And, I think that, the reason I say to listen to the TED talk is because there's a lot more context that's required to fully understand the decision. And I also think that it's important for people to realize that like my correlations behind being unfulfilled in my career, they relate to everybody. It doesn't matter what you're doing. I felt in some ways like I had this dream job. And I realized that when the dream job, the one that I had dreamt, being a surf photographer, wasn't fulfilling, and you can find that in every career, I had to make a conscious decision to figure out how to make it fulfilling, how to test myself. And so I started going to places that were more, required more of me, even monetarily, emotionally, physically, planning. Everything was a
Yeah.
greater investment. And that investment yielded greater results. It yielded greater rewards. And that was insanely cool. Like that's the sickest part of it. And so I feel like that has been like super exciting for me to have the opportunity to kind of go and I guess just figure out, like what it was in those far off beaten path locations that really like was waiting for me there. And I guess what I found was that when I would create an image in those locations, where I had invested so much time, energy, money, planning, etc., the photographs felt more real. I mean, I look at the images now. I'm looking at them around my space, and there's a story. Like those stories are ingrained in me. I can still remember them because they were potent, they were powerful, they were so challenging to get. And when you have experiences like that, it leaves an impression on you and it imprints in you some way. So I don't mean to get like spiritual here, but like that's what I felt and that's what I found. And that's why I've been drawn to places like that still. I mean, nowadays, that's where I've built my best body of work. And it's not that I don't love the tropics. Don't get me wrong. It's just that stories I was being asked to tell and share were not authentic. in that moment.
What is the story behind one of the prints that I've seen, one of the pictures you've taken is there's an individual on the beach and there's these huge ice chunks on the beach and he's looking to like the individual's looking to go out into the water and surf. What's the story behind that photo?
So that image was the cover of a book that I made called Distant Shores.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an Australian surfer named Dion Agius, and he is about to paddle out at this beach that's very popular in Iceland. It's actually called the Diamond Beach. This was maybe like 6 to 8 years ago, something like that. I was actually there helping produce a film for Globe, the brand, surf brand, shoe brand. They were making a 16 millimeter surf film called Strange Rumblings in Shangri-La. It's amazing, amazing surf film. And they had a section on Iceland. And so I produced it and guided them. And I shot a couple images. I actually wasn't the principal photographer on that trip. That was DJ Strunts. And so I remember vividly this day, like I took them to that beach. I wanted them to see it. Occasionally it has waves, and this day was sick, like beautiful kind of light offshore, like wedges, right? Like near the sand, but terrifying because there's sometimes chunks of ice floating in it.
Yeah.
And the image itself is a tiny bit deceiving because it looks more foreboding than it is. And maybe it actually is very foreboding for anybody who isn't experienced or isn't a professional surfer. Yeah, this photo just shows like a explosion of a wave hitting an ice chunk, and then beyond it there's surf out there, and he's like, you know, his attention is obviously caught by this explosion, and he's like, it's kind of this like moment of pause, this moment of like reprieve. And I think that's what I love about that image, but also photography, is it gives you these, if you can do it right, you can capture these moments kind of in between, like the moment in between him like walking out and like focusing on what he's doing, and like just this pause. And I love that because in some way you can like connect with what that subject, what they're experiencing, what they're seeing, maybe even what they're feeling. And that was a cool one. That was a cool trip. They had an amazing session. The cool thing too is that when you're working on a film, you know, you can see what they surfed and where they surfed, and you can see that whole thing visually play out in film as well. So that's the story behind that image.
I was wondering if you try to go out and surf during that day.
No, I was shooting on the beach.
Okay. I mean,
Yeah.
to me, as you know, a pretty non-surfer, I look at that image, I'm just like, that is insane that somebody's about to go surf out there with these huge chunks of ice next to him.
I mean, to be honest, it's not.
It
I
looks
think
awesome.
it's like your appetite for risk changes the more that you do these things, and you start to understand and realize what is actually very dangerous and maybe what isn't. And I think that sometimes as photographers, we become experts in maybe capturing a perspective or an angle that to like the non-user or the non-informed or the non-experienced feels crazy, you know. But that's kind of how it is, you know. The more you go and do these things, even for me, like I see a photo of a car driving in a snowstorm and I'm like, oh, that's rad, like you know, I do that all the time. But for somebody else who hasn't, you know, driven in Nordic countries when it's like dumping snow, it can be utterly terrifying. And so I get it, like I understand, and I've been out in a lot of conditions like that, and they can be really, they can go, you know, what happens is they can go from being fun to chaotic and scary really fast.
Yeah.
So you kind of have to always keep your wits about you. Like,
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You kind of like,
not
you
much
gotta,
downtime.
yeah, and right. I mean, in situations like that, I feel like you said, I mean, it can go scary quick. Is there a film that you've enjoyed working on the most?
I mean, you know, which kind? I've worked on a number of film projects, in more of like the surf, just like action film realm, and then I've worked on some more like personal projects that are about people and stuff like that. Do you have a kind of a preference there, or just
The
anything?
one I had listed here is I Am Here. I went through a bunch of them this morning, and that was one that stuck out to me.
Yeah, so I'm still working on that film. All we have right now is a trailer, and it's actually something we've been trying to get funding for. So I don't really have much more intel on that other than it's a film that recounts a it's a film that recounts a winter crossing of Iceland bike trip. And ultimately it's kind of one of these things where we wanted to tell a deeper narrative. So we honed in on one of the characters, Gus,
Mm-hmm.
who unbeknownst to us at the time was dealing with being a recovering alcoholic and was relapsing. And so the story, the goal here was to kind of tell a tale, a real tale about how this kind of iconic expedition that was so amazing for all of us was sort of um, I don't know, coming at odds with his internal demons. And I think that the greatest films for me are the ones where you get the chance to really like step inside someone's brain,
Mm-hmm.
feel what they're feeling, kind of, kind of consider how they're going about that experience, what it's been like for them. I mean, those are the ones I really love. And I love it when they're based on like an action sports background or like a surfing, climbing kind of narrative, just because that's what I know and that's what I'm passionate about. But yeah, I mean, I think that the other film I've worked the film that I've worked on, Unner, which is about my friend Ellie Thor and his
Mm-hmm.
daughter being a parent and stuff like that, and his experience drowning. Like those are kind of the ones that I've just really cling to.
Yeah, the one I Am Here, it stuck out when I watched the trailer and I was reading about it. I once went to rehab and had an addiction with like pills. So it was very like I wanted more when I was watching the trailer and I went to your website and
Yeah.
like I couldn't find it. So that's why I was wondering where it was and who is this guy and what was his addiction and that sort of stuff. Is your most recent film The Forgotten Coast?
The most recent film is probably um Finding Hetch Hetchy. It released like a year ago, and it's a film about exploring California's water rights and relationship with its national parks. It's a bit more of like a heavy-handed political film, but it's told through the eyes of Timmy O'Neill, the professional climber. Um, so it's a yeah, it's touring festivals, and it just released online, so you can watch that. It's out. The Forgotten Coast is actually a film that we're in the works on producing with Sony right now. It's actually another bike expedition, bike
It looks
raft
awesome.
trip. Yeah, it's going to be insane. The footage is crazy. We're actually putting together like a short, sweet 10-minute edit from that we just want it to be something people can like digest and maybe be left asking for more. It's fun
Yes.
to work. It's fun to work on stuff of like different lengths. I've never done anything feature length, but I like the 40, 50 minute to like 10-minute window is
Mhm.
really, really fun for me because it allows you to employ different storytelling tactics and techniques.
And so for instance, we'll use the Forgotten Coast as an example, but you traveled, from what I read, 300 miles along the coast of Iceland. So you go on this adventure with the crew.
Yeah. So I mean, the greatest, I think, expeditions for me at least are the ones where I get to be, an active participant, and I
Hmm.
feel like that's kind of the stuff that I look forward to the most, right?
Hmm.
In that situation, I wasn't, acting really as a photographer. I brought a small Sony point and shoot, my phone, some GoPros. Um, I look forward to telling the story more. In those projects, I was stepping in as like a producer and a director, and so it's yeah. I mean that's kind of the transition, right? Of like when you only see the world through one perspective, the camera, it can become so incredibly limiting. And so over the last 10 years, trying to, I guess, step away from the camera and step into the role of like director or producer or athlete, it's been
Yeah.
really fulfilling because it gives you just like all of a sudden it's like imagine eating vanilla ice cream every day and then all of a sudden you're like, whoa, Rocky Road, this is incredible. It's still ice cream, but it's different. So I feel like it allows me to see the world differently. It allows me to like empathize with people and yeah, all that stuff. So
What and that was kind of the way I was going because I felt like now, I mean, yes, you're part of creating the film and the project and the production, but it also has to be pretty demanding physically as well. Is there like one of the films or projects you've been on where it's been really demanding on you physically as well?
All of them. I mean, if I'm riding my bike alongside professional athletes, but I haven't spent a lifetime doing that,
Hmm.
I have to train sometimes twice as hard. You know, I have to dedicate a ton of time. It's tricky. Like it's a very tricky relationship. And I won't say I'm not going to tell you it's easy at all. Um, in fact, I would say if anything, it's kind of one of those things where I feel less prepared when I
Sure.
arrive on location and I'm doing those things. Uh, but at the same time, I think that, it's really cool. Like, imagine being a reporter, but you get to be inside the report. Like, you get to be,
Yeah.
inside the story. And so I think as somebody who's maybe sometimes telling a more immersive film about the characters there, me being a character, it's like I get the inside scoop. And I think that is really fun. It's really cool. That's what surf trips always felt like, when I was able to be out in the water swimming around, like you're in the barrel. You're having just as, or if not a scarier experience in the water shooting. You might as well be surfing. And so you're documenting, but like it's such a cool experience because you truly are integrated into that whole dynamic. And
Sure.
I really like that immersiveness when it comes to photography, whether it's like ski touring and you're on slope shooting and you have to ski the same line. Um, those types of things, they get my blood going and they get me excited. I mean, that's the stuff I really love about, I guess you could say, action sports in some way. And not to take anything away from the other types of photography, but that's just the kind that I love the most.
Yeah. And you think about it as like from my point of view, from the viewer, like you watch these films, you watch these amazing, feats of whatever it might be, crossing Iceland. And you're always wondering, how are they actually like capturing all this? And you're like, the crew has to be doing this as well. And then you're like, has the crew isn't like this amazing, who is the crew? And to see like your point of view of like, man, you're training just
Yeah.
like these top athletes.
It's kind of wild, it is kind of wild to think about like what is asked of us in terms of athletes, and then in terms of photographers and things like that. And sometimes it's a tall order. It's a big ask to kind of go into a situation where you don't know the athletes, you don't know the sport, and you're trying to like maybe tell a story where you just don't really understand it. Like, I wouldn't really want to go tell a story about like ocean sailing because I don't know fuck all about ocean sailing. And I admire them, but I would want to like spend time on a boat, get to know them, like integrate a little more so that I could tell the story a little more from a better perspective. I think that's just kind of what it comes down to, is like we want to share stories from honest perspectives. You have to kind of know something about it, or you have to at least know your subject really well to learn which questions to ask, or to your point, which moments to film.
Mm-hmm. With with your family, with your boys, like how do you find that balance between, either spending time in California or in Iceland or spending time with them? Is that something I guess, you've had to prioritize more?
Um, like, are you saying like the time that I'm spending with my family? Has it been
Yeah,
like
like
home?
how much time you spend in Iceland or how much time you spend in the States?
Right now, I mean, it's funny because people think I'm traveling all the time, and I'm actually not traveling as much as I used to. I do less trips. I just do them for longer, but most of the places I'm going are places that I either take my kids or places they have a relationship with, like Iceland. So like um going there, it's rad because it's a base for Europe. I can fly to, London or, you know, Stockholm or Norway or whatever really quickly. And oftentimes my kids are coming there with me in Iceland for 3 months, living there in the summer. So that's been
That's
really,
awesome.
really amazing. And I will just say, like, to me, that's always been my dream, is to go to places that they feel close to and connected to. And, um, sometimes I guess what I've realized about families, kids, things like that, is that life doesn't there's no such thing as finding balance. It's all about finding rhythm. Like, your life is going to go like this and then sometimes be like this, right? It's going to oscillate. And what I mean by that is, some years, if you're coming out with a film, you have to tour that film. Why would you make a film if you're not going to see it through to the end and
Hmm.
go everywhere? Like, that's a big ask. It takes a lot of time away from the family. It takes a lot of time away from personal endeavors, right? So don't do it if you're not going to commit yourself, because you don't want your project to turn out like crap. So what I've realized is that I need to, when I'm home, really make sure I spend time connecting with my family, doing things that they love, doing things I love, going to see the important places and things that are significant to us all. And then when I'm gone, you know, I'm really focused on work. I'm working 100%, you know, don't need to like go and take a bunch of time for myself. And it's just kind of a balance that you find, you know, and I think that's the key thing that I've tried to figure out, you know, and I know I use that word balance and I just said not to, but it's like, and I guess what I mean is like everybody finds their own version of it, right? And my wife and I understand that, like, man, these next 3 months are going to be tough. How can I compensate for these crazy next 3 months? I can't make some plan like I'm going to call you every day and FaceTime every night because it's not realistic.
Yeah,
right.
sure.
So you find the balance that works for you. And really you're just trying to find a rhythm that everybody can sync with, if that makes sense.
With they got a cool ass dad, by the way. Do you have a project like that you want to make sure you make, or something that you've always had on your mind that like one day I'm going to make this film or this project?
Right now, like something that's in the future, like in my mind kind of thing, like that
Yeah,
I'm,
or it could be one that you've always thought about.
I mean, there's a ton. There's a lot. They're always swirling up here, and oftentimes I'll put them down in a notebook, or I'll put them down in like kind of a little journal. I'll be like, oh, I'll circle back to that one. Like there's projects that I've almost done 3-4 years in a row that I just couldn't find the time, couldn't find the window, couldn't find the budget. You know, that's a big part of it. You know, the film I Am Here, like I want to do that film, but I want to do it right. We want to make it a feature length film. We want to, you know, um, we want to like make it something we're proud of, you know. So that's kind of the biggest and most important thing is that I think that getting older, I don't want to just like take it like, oh yeah, I'll take that little budget and I'll make that film, and it just
Sure.
it falls flat. It doesn't come to like the conclusion of what it could have. It doesn't reach its potential. And I think that having done this a number of years, I think that the only thing that I'm better at is seeing the potential for projects and trying to see them through, right? Seeing the potential for what something could be, because I know how powerful the story is. And sometimes that means that I'm the only person seeing it, but you have to learn to like believe in yourself. And it's kind of fun to like talk to my kids about that and let them see, like, even me, like I have failures all the time. I'm not afraid of failing. Like
Definitely.
that's a I think it's a coming of age thing, you know, like I was afraid of failing 15 years ago, but nowadays, like I'll take a big swing. And if it sucks, it sucks. I learned something.
That's I tell people that like I'm not afraid of being wrong and I'm not afraid of failing, because it's the way I react to that. Hopefully I'm growing and getting better. This is a question that I just thought of, and it could be a dumb question, but for a film like I Am Here, so you already have that content, you're just waiting for the funding to make it.
Yeah. Well, and the funding comes from like, it's already been shot, but like if, you know, and which is great, but we need to edit it. We need to add music, sound design, et cetera, et cetera. Those are a lot of costs, right? And then to make it the longer, like if I wanted to make a 10-minute film, I could pay for that. If I wanted to make a 20-minute film, I could pay for that. Or I could find my partners and we could do it. But if we want to make a 30, 40, 50-minute film, just as like a really, really rough number, a lot of times you look at, it's $1,000 a minute for each of those things for, you know, for basically for any length of time. So 40 minutes, 40 grand for music, 40 grand for
Dang.
sound design. Like, I mean, that's just like super rough, right? But if you want to make something that's like submittable to Tribeca or a proper film festival that then you'd want to sell, you're looking at real costs, right? And if you want to make any money from it, you need to know what those costs might look like. Now, if my goals are different and I'm just there to like create a little marketing piece, then it's a different idea, a different goal.
Do you have one award that you're most proud of?
No, not really. You know, I've been lucky to receive a few, and I'm really honored by those. And there was a time in my career when I was kind of like chasing those, you
Yeah,
know,
stacking them up or something.
or not stacking them up, but just like trying, you know, like submitting to everything and blah, blah, blah. And, you know, I think that being asked to speak on the TED stage was like the biggest and most
It's
important
pretty
thing.
cool.
Yeah, super cool, like amazing. And so that is huge. I was honored by that. It's not like TEDx where anybody can speak. It's like the TED team asks you to speak at the global event, and you're sitting next to I don't even know, Monica Lewinsky and freaking the climate guy. And in your session is like just the craziest people you've ever imagined. And so I think that like that was a huge honor for just some random kid from California.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
What is your advice, or if you're giving a talk to some high schoolers or some middle schoolers and they're trying to figure out their way, like what is, you're an explorer, right? You have this incredible, what people think is this incredible career, and you went out on your own at an early age. But what is your advice for people to like follow their dreams or like do what they love?
What is my advice? That's a big question. I would say that the most important thing that I've realized is like is and again, I'm not here to like tell people advice to like how to be a good dad or how to be a good business owner or how, like, this is specifically focused on creativity and photography mostly, but also just like creativity as a whole. You don't need to do everything well. You don't need to be, an amazing portrait photographer, an animal photographer, and shoot action sports. And oh my gosh, you can shoot landscapes too. Like, because nobody hires you for that. There's nobody out there who hires you because you're a jack of all trades. You're pretty good at everything. And if you are being hired for that reason, are you actually going to be saying something meaningful about who you are as a creative, about your eye, about your work? Typically, most clients that you want are going to hire you because you're a specialist in something. And I specialized in something for a number of years. And yes, I worked on other portfolios, but I also learned a golden rule. You have to invest in those portfolios. You have to invest in them. And what I mean by that is that you have to go out, put yourself on spec, shoot that portfolio, because nobody's going to hire you to do it until you've proven that you can. And so when I wanted to shoot, compelling aerial photography, and before I got hired by, Apple and a bunch of other brands to do it, I was spending my own money, going out and figuring it out, hiring planes, shooting over areas. I flew last night with a friend, I paid for it, right? So that I could go and hone my craft, right? It doesn't end. You don't just become good and then it stops. You're great. All of a sudden, no more like practicing. So I think that there's something about the fact that like you're a lifelong learner, you learn to specialize and you invest in those portfolios. I was a surf photographer for, 10 years. And during that time, I invested my time into other types of photography, starting at the bottom and figuring it out. And now there are types of photography I don't feel comfortable with. I don't really feel comfortable with like studio lit product photography. It's just not my forte. I'm not the best option. I could do it, but there are better people. So I think that being realistic with yourself, being honest with yourself, and realizing what clients want and what they need, that's the most important thing.
Was there a photographer or a creative or artist that you looked up to growing up?
I mean, there's thousands. I mean, yeah, of course.
There's not one or two that sticks out?
I mean, for different reasons, there are people who like are passed away that I looked up to their work, and I read their autobiographies and I studied their work, and I learned a lot about them that way. And then there are people that I actually had a chance to spend time with, Michael Fatali being one of them. He's a large format landscape photographer from the Southwest. But to be honest, like there's so many people. And I guess the reason I kind of wince at that question is because although learning, like people, because what people take away is like, oh, I need to get a memoir. I need to get a mentor. That's what I need to do. And that's kind of what you're asking. You want to know who mentored me and this, that, and that's just not realistic. Like I never had a mentor. I had people that I admired, people that I spent some time with, but there was no mentor in that situation. And the reason I tell people that is that you don't need a mentor. You can go out and be given permission to just try something, copy somebody if you want to. That's fine. We all copy somebody at some point. Our work is oftentimes a replica of people that we're inspired by. And then we try and we try, and maybe we succeed a little bit, and then we suck again, and we try, and then we fail. And then all of a sudden we go and we create something that feels more genuine, feels more authentic. The goal is that you keep trying. Now, when I started in photography, there wasn't a bajillion resources like all of these online workshops and all these things that you could take nowadays. There's thousands. If I had those at my fingertips when I started, I would have taken every online course you could have ever seen. But the idea that you need a mentor to kind of show you the ropes and help you figure it out, I just don't think that's realistic. And I think that too many people use that as a crutch, right? If it was me, I found more inspiration, more like genuine inspiration when I stopped looking at photography, when I started looking other places. Even nowadays, I feel like I find more inspiration looking at a, great typography, great illustration, great storytelling from other mediums, even talking to a very like talented barista about their fascination with coffee. Like learning to be a student of creativity is important. That's where and how you become a good storyteller, because you learn to find and tune your ear to good stories, right? Taking interesting photos or good photos is just like one very simple part of the craft, right? So that's the thing, is that Michael Fatali, he could train me on how to use a large format camera, or I could just have done it online nowadays. But he's not going to train me for how to like see a landscape, right? It's just not something they can do. So I guess sometimes I see people seeking so hard to find a mentor and then only to become a miniature copy of that person, then never find their own voice.
Yeah. It's like your own passion, your own journey. Well, Chris, man,
it's just one way of looking at it.
I mean, dude, you're so authentic and genuine in the way you even like talk and answer these questions. And, it's not phony. And that's probably been a lot of the traits that have helped you get to where you are today, which is incredible. And your work is inspiring. And it's like amazing for me to look at, and watch and see.
I appreciate that, man. It's honestly, it's a joy I love podcasts. I love long form conversation and the questions that come from it. It gives people a chance to explain themselves and kind of articulate instead of just like an email. So I appreciate you. I appreciate the craft that you are pursuing. And, hopefully next time I get to ask you more questions and learn more about you. And dude, thank you so much.
Dude, you can ask me as many questions as you want. I'm an open book. So, well, thank you so much, Chris.
Yeah, dude.